Okay. Well, I guess I'll introduce myself a little bit. I'm Enoch. I live out in Eagle Mountain. That's where I am right now. I'm starting my senior year, my last year in the civil engineering department this coming year. So almost done, not quite. Yeah, I haven't been in the lab all that long, so I'm still kind of new, but kind of not. I don't know.
When are you graduating, Enoch?
I'll graduate next April.
So are you going to the Dominican Republic for your capstone?
Probably not.
You should think about it. We'll
Yeah.
talk later.
When do they usually go?
And late January, early February.
Huh.
Anyway, we'll talk later. Carry on.
Cool. Yeah, that would be fun. Anyways, I guess I'll show my screen. So this module isn't super complex and it's not completely done yet. The idea behind this one is kind of there's a whole bunch of random things that aren't entirely connected, but it's kind of just basic practices and tips for programming, things that make it easier, ideas, concepts. So Rohit looks like, I think you're still planning on filling in those first two sections, right?
Yeah, one day. But the goal, what I was hoping is if you wanted to just go through the stuff that's already there,
Yeah.
take a few minutes at the end, try to go over what I'm planning to put in here. Just a few things that I have on my mind yet, but yeah, those two sections are still to be done.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that, and then I'm still trying to put in some sort of a hands-on practice thing, but anyways, how many people have kind of gone through this already?
I have.
I have two.
Okay. Would someone kind of like to just give a rundown of what they thought of it? What did you get out of it? Were there things you liked, things that you think need to change?
I think it was all pretty good. Like what was there. I think definitely adding a hands-on section and filling in the gaps would help it a lot. But yeah, I think the coding practices stuff was really good. So.
Okay. Yeah. So let's just look through the different sections on this. Good programming practices, debugging log files, those are yet to come. Using comments, just a good, comments are so useful in code. But pretty straightforward, like you put comments in your code, backing up your code, utilizing the internet, learning the concepts, Googling the syntax. One of my problems with this one that I wasn't sure how it worked was since the sections are so kind of disjointed, does it seem like it has a flow that works well?
I think so. Like to me, it didn't really seem too disjointed because they all kind of have to do with like the broad topic of good coding practice, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was fine.
So I'd like some feedback on it. Does anyone have anything or even ideas for this hands-on section? My thought was to write a brief segment of code that you could basically use the different ideas on. Like put in comments, change something from Python to JavaScript or the other way around, and Google that syntax, reformat something.
I think that would be a really good idea. And I would also just include, like, if you do a hands-on practice kind of like that, like converting from Python to JavaScript, just include like either a step-by-step like instruction on how to do that, because some of us might not know how to do that, and then like just kind of a key. But it would be nice to have something that we can like try out first by ourselves, and then like have some sort of like guide to look at and be like, oh, this is exactly how it should be, you know, give or take, because I'm sure the comments can be like, you know, a little bit different depending on who writes them. But I think that would be a really good like application for the training.
Okay.
So one thing that I was thinking we could do is just have a Python script basically with some bugs in there on purpose, comments in there that explain what the code is supposed to do, but it's not doing that, it's doing something else. And so the exercise would be is going through and making that work. It should be something pretty straightforward, like maybe just working through a set of strings, or, you know, something that gets people familiar with Python, but also lets people understand why PEP8 is important or why commenting can help. And so basically the comments would be what people would use to figure out what's wrong with the code, Google things, find out what the issue is, fix it, and that would be your goal, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
I also think it'd be good to include like screen captures of like really bad, like code using really bad coding practice, and then code using really good coding practice. So it's like, okay, this is what you don't want it to look like. And like, this would be a really good idea of what you can make it look like. I think that'd be really helpful.
That's part of what was going to demo today, but that's something that I plan to include in the first couple sections. The first section with good programming practices, just 4 or 5 examples of here's how you could do this in a good way, and here's how you could still get it done, but not in the best way possible.
Totally, I think that's a great idea.
I think one of the links actually has like examples of doing it wrong and doing it right.
Oh, the PEP8 one, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I read through that and it showed like a bunch of examples of doing it wrong and then like the correct way to do it. And that was really helpful.
Let's see. Oh yeah, this one is very, very clear on what they don't like. But does everybody understand what PEP8 is? And like, anybody has any questions about PEP8? So PEP8, just to understand, is not a syntax. It's not that if you don't follow PEP8's guidelines, you won't be able to code in Python. It's just PEP8 is, since everybody has a different coding style, almost every language has some sort of coding standard. And PEP8 is one for Python. JavaScript has its own ECMAScript and other things involved in there. But that's the idea, is basically these standards, if you follow them, your code is uniform. And this helps especially in our lab environment, because oftentimes one person is working on a set of code and then someone else is also working on that piece of code. So if both of them are following PEP8, then the code remains uniform and it's easy to understand for both parties, instead of someone being confused and not understanding certain parts of the code, but just because your coding style was slightly different.
So that's a question I have for you, Rohit. Are there other coding style standards for other languages that we use that would be good to include as well? Or is PEP8 pretty much the main one that we want people to be aware of?
Pepid is the most important one, and most of the time I don't even think about it. Just the way I implement Pepid is that I have a auto formatter in my Sublime. So I use Sublime for my editing, and I have, sorry, my cat just jumped on my laptop. Bye. Okay. But yeah, so for us, I think Python Pep8 is the best. JavaScript has too many standards, and there's only one unified one that I really like. It's basically using TypeScript, and then the TypeScript is compiled down to JavaScript. But I feel like that's something that we don't need to explore over here because um, I don't I don't know, we don't have that much of JavaScript writing. So like if we were writing a pure JavaScript app in Angular or React, that's where those things would be helpful.
Okay.
And Angular React actually force those things pretty heavily on you itself. So you kind of have to use the coding styles. But yeah, no. And the third thing that we usually write is HTML, which again is a very well-defined standard. So Pep8 should be enough. And most of the time, like for example, if you use IntelliJ or some sort of IDE, Pep8 is automatically implemented whenever you say, I think in PyCharm, it's, I don't know, fix code or something. In like it just basically goes through the code and fixes any Pep8 issues it finds and replaces it. I can show you a couple examples of Pep8 as well being implemented automatically in my editor once I go towards there.
Do you want to share your screen for a second, or?
Sure, yeah, if you're ready. The first thing I want to do is, so let's do this. Okay. So just from reading and from your own personal experience, this is a more sort of an open question for everyone, is what are things that you see or have seen that you would consider either good or bad programming practices? Like just a few things off the top of your head. And it's an open sort of question, so if anybody wants to chime in, that would be great.
I hate it when I'm helping a student and they've named a variable, I hate this class, or this is a stupid program.
Yeah.
That's bad programming practice.
Or you have variable 1, variable 2, variable
Yeah.
3, variable 4 as the names.
At least I haven't had anybody yet say Dr. Nelson is stupid for a variable.
They do want to pass.
But I've had a few students with some embarrassing variable names when I've sat down to help them.
I used to see that in 270 where they would think that they wouldn't show me the code ever, so they would write whatever. And then they had to have to get help, and that wasn't fun.
I'll also throw out poor use of indentation. You know, I think that's indentation is really helpful to understand the flow of controlling your code.
Mm-hmm. Any other ideas or?
Yeah, I feel like with commenting, like some people don't really leave any comments. And I think it's a lot better to like kind of over comment, and so that when you're going back and like trying to troubleshoot or make things better, it's a lot easier to kind of find the sections, and someone else could look at your code and be like, oh, I know exactly what's going on here, like a lot quicker.
Commenting, yep, very important. It's sort of like this situation, right? My code doesn't work. That's like kind of what debugging starts at. I had to go Google that meme. But there's another one that I was actually looking for where it's like, oh, I wrote this code on Friday and I look at it on Monday and I have no idea what I wrote. So I think that was one of the first points is that I wanted to bring up is your code should be readable. And there's this one that there's another kind of tool called PEP20. PEP20 is basically just someone went a little bit ahead on PEP8 and defined a few more guidelines, but it's not, I mean, I wouldn't say we need to follow each one of it, but this stands out a lot to me, readability counts. And for that, what I wanted to do is show an example of, and this is from actually our own app called Hydroviewer that we use a lot in our lab, and we have like 7 to 10 different types of it. I don't even know how many Hydroviewers we have now. But what I wanted you guys to do is here, I'll post this link on our chat. If I can figure out how to get to chat. Oh, there it is. And this is just one of the files in this GitHub repository. So what I want you guys to do is just kind of scroll through it very quickly. This is all JavaScript code. It's not written in Python, so it might be something that there are lots of things that are not really familiar. But I just want to get first impressions, as in, what do you think maybe this code is doing right in terms of good programming practices? What do you think could be improved in terms of just programming practice concept to maybe improve readability? Maybe there are things that could be named better, just things like that. What would you like? Just spend a couple minutes on this and see what you think you could improve on, or what are the good parts of this code.
I'm not sure if I'm seeing any commenting, so I'm kind of concerned about that.
Definitely, that's one of the biggest things in this file is, one, there are hardly any comments. There are functions that are doing things, but you don't really know what they're doing. So if someone who didn't write this code, if I asked one of you guys to go ahead and say, hey, I have a bug in, I don't know, getting the return periods or doing something, or my click is not registering on the map, it would be not the most straightforward approach to go ahead and kind of figure out what went wrong or where to even start looking. Anything else that stands out to anyone?
I think it's good that they have that list of variables at the beginning, that they just kind of defined them all at once.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're doing. And they all kind of like make sense. Like you can tell what that variable is going to be based on its name.
Yes, it's good and it's bad in a way. So
Yeah.
this is something you will discover more when you get into JavaScript, is the fact that having global variables like this is just a problem at the end of the day.
Okay.
The reason being is, and I'll show you this. So if we go to our Datas portal and look at any of our Hydroviewers. So let's see. I think this should work. Okay, so now since we have this, remember that we had this bunch of variables over here. Since they're global, the thing is they can be accessed by anyone in the browser. And so anytime a page is loaded, any backend data that's being saved can be accessed, which is fine for most things, except what if I was saving, well, in this case, we are not, which is nice, but we were saving some credentials over here, like the database access, and we were saving the username and password for that. If they are global variables like this, I can just go to my Chrome in console, which if you have a Mac, it's Command Option. No, that's downloads. Yeah, Command Option J. And it opens this tab with a bunch of different things on top, but you could just go to your console. And if I just type that variable name, I can actually get the value for that variable and see exactly what each that variable contains completely. Good while debugging, not great while production. Plus in this case, the other reason why I would say global variables are not good is in this case, we only have one file, so it's fine. But if we had multiple JavaScript files, that would be an issue. That actually brings me to my second, one of my bigger issues with this file is it's 1104 lines long. Now that, as soon as I see that, I have an issue with that for various reasons. One, modularity, like the code itself, it's so difficult to go through an 1100 line file and figure out exactly what you're doing. Not only that, editing an 1100 line file when an error happens on line 694, you're spending about 30 seconds just looking for it. And so having a file that's this big is not really the best approach. And I want to show you an example while we're talking about this. So this is the warehouse app that I'm working on. We saw a demo of this on Friday. But the idea is I had just one JavaScript file initially. And if you notice, even here, since I've declared a global variable, I've already left a comment saying, hey, I don't think this is the best way to do this right now. So I would want to do it in the future. One thing, I don't know if this is mentioned, but if you mark @todo in your comment, a lot of IDEs will immediately pick up on it and understand and build a to-do list for you. PyCharm does this automatically. If you have a comment saying, fix this global variable, and in PyCharm, I can go to my to-do list and just have a list of what all to-dos do I have across my code, which is nice because then you can go ahead and fix those in the future if you need to. But yeah, the thing that I wanted to point out, this file is about 265 lines right now, but it had got to about 400, 500 lines, and I wanted to really reduce it. So that's where the first principle of kind of good programming comes into play is modularity, is if you can separate your codes into smaller chunks, they will be easily managed, and you can just focus on that specific part of the code. So just to give you an example, right here, there is a place where I have on the warehouse app. So actually, let's see. Hey, it did load. Okay. But this is probably going to give me an error because I did that on purpose. But anyways, we'll come back to that in a second. But there's a place where I need some function to run. So I just take that function, put it in a separate module, call it HTML helpers. And then I can describe each one of them separately. And now I can just use this HTML helpers right here. And this way, any part of my JavaScript that's working with HTML can be put in a separate file, and I can have one place where I can just go and look at all of those and manage them, and even bring them together if I need to, because some of them can be used. So like, for example, this one is building a select drop-down option. And right now, there are two functions that are doing the same exact thing, because this one is doing the same thing as well. And so I could combine those two functions and make them universal so that they work for both cases that I'm using them in. So just certain things that I could improve. But while we were looking at this, then I want you guys to look at this one real quick. And this is an HTML template in Django. And here, let me find my chat window. So most of the code written over there is in HTML. What reactions do you guys have to that? And here's another file for you guys to look at if you want to. This is all Python code. So this might seem a little bit more in tune with what we've been doing for the last few weeks. Any impressions, any suggestions how we could improve this file, things that could be going wrong in terms of styling, because the code works. And there's 1,000 ways to do the same exact thing in a piece of code, but which is the most efficient and the most manageable way? That's what we have to find. Nope. Any thoughts, suggestions, things that you feel could be changed in this piece of code? I'll get us started. Again, same problem that I had last time. This code has 1,515 lines, so 1,515 lines. Again, too big of a file, too difficult to manage. There are so many different things that are doing things, and so just to track down what is happening will be pretty difficult. And just to show you, I had a similar issue in my app. And if you notice, I have a controllers.py file as well. Almost every Tethys app will have a controllers.py file because that renders your main pages. But if you notice, mine's only about 100 lines long, because what I did is whatever functions this file needed to call, I just moved them to separate files that manage specific things. So for an example, I had this entire piece of code up in my controllers.py, and what this does is sets up a communication channel between my front end, between my browser, when the user is visiting the browser, and the backside, the Python side. And so, to be honest, it doesn't really need to exist in controllers.py, it just needs to be a part of it. And so all I can do is, I can say from my notifications, import everything. And that way, I don't have to manage this piece of code within this file. And I know exactly if something goes wrong with notifications, where to look. I can just go to notifications.py and see what's going wrong over there. Same thing with, this is basically an app that installs other apps. So it has a bunch of handlers, and all of them sit in a separate file, which again is also getting pretty long. It's about 198 right now. But I know exactly where to find if there's an issue or an existing piece of code, and then go look for there. Now, I have purposely introduced a bug in this code, and I just wanted to go through how I would debug it if I was in your shoe. Considering that I know nothing about this app, let me try and pretend that I have no idea how this app works. I have just downloaded the app, installed it on my system, and I want it to work. And let's see if I can get that bug to happen. So I have my Tethys running right here. So if I go to my local host and look at my app real quick, I should get an error, but let's see. Yeah, okay. So in Django, generally when your app has an error, it will give you a lot more details than a normal Python script would. A normal Python script would probably just give you something in your terminal that shows you what the error is. So I can bring this font up a little bit bigger. And that's not what I wanted. So okay. But when generally what I've seen with a lot of new programmers is that when they see something like this, it's just like, help, what do I do? Like it's a panic kind of situation. You don't want to be in an error case. The thing is though, is computers are pretty smart, but only as smart as what you tell them to do. So if you tell them to do something that shouldn't be done, they'll try and throw an error. And so you don't have to worry about breaking anything. It's just that, yeah, that an error happened, just let's get it fixed. So in this case, assuming that I know nothing about the app, I just look at this page and try to figure out what the error is, where it is, and maybe I can find it and fix it. Just by seeing this page, does anybody have any ideas where I could look to find my error? Or which file, which, I don't know, function?
Would it be line 34, your response? Just that
Line 34. Okay, so that's a good place to start. So it says when this is basically an internal Django function, and it's saying, okay, response equals to get response request. Now the weird thing is, these are all Django functions. So if Django didn't work well, it wouldn't be a publicly available library, right? So my mind starts to think, okay, Django is maybe not the problem. Django is something that's working fine. It's maybe my part of the code that's the problem. So you're right on the track. I start looking at traceback and I start going down step by step. I'm like, okay, this is also a Django internal thing. This is also a Django internal thing, because you can see the path of the file that the error is happening in. And this is also Django. Then I reach this guy, which points to a file that is in my warehouse app, in controllers.py, in the function called home, and it tells me exactly which line number has an issue. Right? So let's go look at that line and see what's happening there. So this is where it's saying there's an issue. What is wrong? What am I doing wrong here? Any ideas?
Is it the double quotes around temp?
Okay, maybe. And that's part of debugging. It's like, okay, maybe temp needs to be single quotes. I change that, I save it, and then I go do the stupid thing that debuggers do, try again. So my app reloads, I go back to my warehouse, and nope, that didn't fix it. So any other ideas?
The other double quotes.
Fair enough. No, and this is exactly what I wanted to show, is the part of debugging processes. Sometimes we're not sure what the correct solution is, because it's not always that you can just Google the error message and find the exact answer. You can find similar answers. And so that's when debugging becomes a pain, but when you find the bug, it's very satisfying. Depends on how long you spend on it. But anyways, so yeah, I changed that. And now this will restart my app. I'm going to go back to my app and refresh it, and I still have the same error. Let me go back to my code. These two lines is basically, it's saying this line is where the problem is.
So if you go back to your other page, that also helps on your app. If you look up above, it tells you.
Exactly. That's what I was going to point out at, is Django will be nice enough, and even Python does this for a lot of times. It will give you the error message. So if I was just in a Python interface and I did the same exact thing, I get the same exact error. So that basically tells us, okay, there's something wrong with this line, but we still don't know what. At this point, I mean, I know what's wrong, just for clarity's sake. What my next step would be is, okay, I tried a couple things that I thought of, but I couldn't figure out, it still didn't work, right? So let's take this error message, just Google it, literally. Stack Overflow is awesome. If you haven't used it yet, you will. Most programmers will swear by it. Our lives wouldn't survive without Stack Overflow, to be honest. And that's true for any level of programmer, whether you're starting on day one. I have been coding for, yeah, I'm almost 29, but I wrote my first website when I was 13, so about 15 years now. And I still Google some of the most common things. And that's very natural. That's something that I've seen in big companies where I've worked with architects for 20 years. Google is your best. If the internet goes down, there's basically no coding. So I go here, I see, okay, there's the same error message. And maybe this guy is doing something similar to what I was doing. And 99% of the time on Stack Overflow, I skip over the question. I just go to the first answer and be like, okay, let's look at the first answer. If it solves my problem, then it's fine. In this case, it doesn't, because it looks like this is very specific to this specific problem. So I go through a couple more results, and then it's like, yeah, again, that doesn't really make any sense. So at this point, I'm actually going to go back to the code and try to look at it, figure out what I'm doing wrong. In this case, the answer is this is an array. And if I would have done this, which is a Python dictionary, then I can do this, where, let me show you an example. So if test was just a dictionary and then I did test temp, it will just work fine. And then if I do a print on my object, you can see that temp has been assigned to temp, and it exists as a dictionary, which is basically there's a key and there's a value. However, when you have an array is basically, so if I do this, it's just a single value that, you know, it can be a sequence of values. So this is just a minor thing in Python. It can happen at times, but just to give you an idea of when you have a bug, how do you solve it? So in this case, I don't actually want to do this, but I could. And then I see that my app reloads. And once that happens, I can go back to my interface, refresh it, and it all loads just fine. So this is part of Python debugging. A very, very critical tool that I use a lot is during debugging is, well, what does this object look like? So if I wanted to make sure that tag underscore list was being populated by the same way that I wanted it to, I can do a print tag list at any point in my code. And this won't impact what I see on my browser. If you notice, it's still the same exact thing. There's nothing in my console that gets printed out. But if I go to my terminal where this is all running, I can see after my server started, there's a line that gets printed. That is what I want from my code. So print is a really good tool to check at times whether, if you're working through, so this is pretty straightforward, like a 4-line function. But then if you have something like this guy, where it's about 20, 30 lines, and your code works till a certain point, but then you're like, oh, maybe I am having an issue getting this variable. So you can just print this right here and see what the result is coming out, and then compare it to what you expect it to be. So that's one quick way of, or rather that's kind of the workflow that I follow while debugging Python code. Let's quickly look at a rough example in a JavaScript code. In how do I want to introduce an error here somewhere. Let's see, or a bug. Let's try and introduce a bug. So okay, let's try this. This is fun. Okay. Actually, that won't work because this is the code here, right here. So normally when you're working with JavaScript in a Tethys app, you won't have to reload. If you notice, there's no reload that happens here. The reason is because JavaScript is a front-end file, and so when you refresh the page, they automatically get a new copy of it. And so in this app, when I click here, and then I click here, this should actually, oh, well, why did that work? That shouldn't have worked. Okay, let's see now. Inspect. Oh, okay. That's because I somehow make it work. Okay, so I guess that's not going to introduce a bug, but let's put that back. Let me just do this. So now I just randomly added a syntax error, and in JavaScript, your errors will show up on your console in your browser. And so it's just like, okay, hey, you have an unexpected token. Now Chrome is pretty nice. You can directly click on the line number, and it will open the file that you see the error in. This is another reason why I emphasize on keeping your code in separate files so that it's easier to look up things like this. But it clearly points out, hey, there's an extra comma in this line. You need to get rid of it. You can just go here and say, okay, I'm going to get rid of it, fix it. And now when you restart your page or refresh your page, you don't see an error. One last thing I want to touch upon in JavaScript debugging is using console.log. And basically what you can do is from your JavaScript, send any message to this console right here. So let's say you're working in this, and I have a place in the app where I want to say, okay, whenever someone clicks on this app button, I want to see a message come up over here, or I want to see that the click happened. And so I can just go to the click function and say, hey, whenever this is clicked, can you just say I was clicked? And I can add other messages if I wanted to, which in this case, I want to say, hey, can you pass me what object this is? And this might or might not work. We'll find out. And let's see what happens. So now when I go back, nothing happens so far, but then I click on it. If you notice, it says, okay, I was clicked, and it gives me the HTML element that was clicked, which is just a button with certain images and other things installed on it. And so I can go in here and look into the element and see, oh, okay, this is how it should work. But yeah, those are just rough ideas on how I would go about debugging. I was actually going through some of the best practice guidelines. But this is pretty important. Beautiful is better than ugly. Make sure your code is beautiful. Make sure your variables are named correctly, or at least like in a way they make sense to whoever's reading it next. Like for example, if I go to my controller, actually over here, yeah, like right here, if I had just named this settings and continued using it like that, there's a chance that it makes sense. That I might get confused later on, but if you notice, I've named it exactly unlinked settings. So even if like you don't have any knowledge about the app, this tells you something that this is settings that have not been linked. Like it gives you that much information just by the variable name. And so you can, kind of speculate from there that what this variable is supposed to contain and what it's supposed to do. The same rule applies for your function name as well. Make sure they're descriptive, but not too long. But they kind of give you an idea of what they're doing. So like I have a function here that's called get service type from setting. So it's very clear in that I'm getting a service type from a setting. And that's the exact purpose of it. There's nothing else to do. So make sure you name your variables that way so that you can find code easily and work through that. See, like for example, right here, this is from our Hydroviewer code. There's a home and there's a home standard. Now, home standard doesn't give me any information about what that function is supposed to do, nor are there any comments that tells me what it's supposed to do. So this would be something that if I was going for programming practice review, I would be like, no, you need to rename this into a better function or add some description or comments in here saying, hey, this is what this function does. Just to show you an example of what good code or like slightly better code looks like. So if you go to the Tethys main code and we look at any one of the files, so let's just go here. This one, nah, this one doesn't have that many good comments. Let's see. Yeah, so with these, if you notice, first of all, the commands itself, services create dataset command. It's pretty obvious that this command is going to create a dataset service. The second thing that it does is this, it has these comments which says, okay, interacts with the Tethys service to create them and or link them to existing apps. So not only does the name give you information, the text as well, which is useful when sometimes you don't know the name of the function. You can just search for something like this within the code and find this function that you might be looking for. But yeah, those are just certain things that I thought I would mention. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, readability counts, very important. Fix each error as soon as you discover it, including if it's just a bad design or just, if you can improve the code or you can add some comments right then and there, then do it. Sometimes comments get out of hand. So just to give you an example, where is that? Yeah, so if you notice over here, this one defines the method about what it's doing, but then I was doing something over here that I had to work like 5 different methods to get it working. And so that's why I've left a comment in here saying, okay, this is what I need to do here. Then I tried doing this and this, but none of them are reliable and they'll throw errors at time. So the best way to do this is do it this way. And then if you notice, I have a to-do block saying, hey, when I get this basic step working, then please make sure that it works through multiple runs. So I can do 20 installs in a row and it'll still work. But that's kind of the idea of leaving comments that are helpful to you while development, as well as helpful to someone else, because someone else might come in the future and look at this code and be like, hey, why are you not just getting the conda prefix from the environment? Like, just why are you not doing that? So here's why I leave my reasons for whoever in the future gets the misfortune of working with this code or whatever. Another part over here is when I found something on Stack Overflow, which I was like, okay, I didn't know how to do this. I looked for it, and here's the reason why I did it. So if you want more information, someone can actually go to that Stack Overflow URL, figure out why this is being done, and then that would make sense, hopefully. But yeah, that's all I've got so far. I plan to add a bunch of these things to the module. So we talked about debugging, we talked about a few good programming practices. We didn't really touch upon log files. Actually, we have a couple minutes real quick. So when we are running Tethys locally, you see that I was able to see the error right here on my terminal. But when we are running Tethys on a server, this is what our terminal looks like. And so if I go to tethys2.byu.edu, and if there are any errors that are to happen in this app, how would I be able to see them? How would I be able to see what the issue is? So for example, if I go to this groundwater level mapper tool, and I say, okay, I'm gonna purposely try to break it. Let's see if I can. I think this breaks. Yeah. So if you notice, it tried doing a request and it failed with an internal server error. Now I want to know what this error is. I want to see what the issue is. So for that, I have to look at something called log files. And every process that's running on a server will generate a log file. And that is that specifically. Most log files will be in var log. So if you go to cd/var log, you'll see there's a bunch of different logs by different people, by different applications that are running on the system. However, we are only interested in one specific log, which in this case is saved at this log directory, and there's another one. So there are two logs, another log. And remember, if from our last discussion, first discussion, we used the tail command, and what I can do is do tail-f to follow it. And what this is doing is now basically giving me a log of what is happening at what point, and you can see how there's an error. If I want more details about it, I can do, give me the last 100 lines. And I can see, hey, when this URL was called, this was the error that was that happened. And so now I can go in and debug and find out what the error was. So this is just a very quick introduction to how log files can help you. And if you notice, someone is doing something right now to this app, and I can see that happening in the background right as it is happening, which is kind of coincidental. But yeah, that's kind of the idea with log files. You have log files for everything in your system, and you can use them to debug various issues. But yeah, that's all I got. Anybody has any questions, concerns, any suggestions of things that we should also include that I might have missed?
Thanks, Rohit and Enoch. I know that some of these things are, you have to have the problem before you really need the tool and figure out how to use it. But I think this information serves as a good reference. I'm not sure how much of this you're going to document, Rohit, in terms of some of the things that you went through in that part. I don't think you have to do everything. This is also going to be recorded, and we're going to keep these presentations as well. But I appreciate it.
If that's the hope, that one day that some of you are working on an app and trying to debug an issue, and you remember, oh, this is what that weird brown dude had said. So let's try and do that.
Right. In case Enoch and Rohit aren't here to ask anymore.
I hope we are not here eventually.
Eventually. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thanks.
Let's see. Yeah. We'll see you on Thursday, if not before.
Hey, Enoch, did you get help with your figuring out Plotly and?
Yeah, I did. Riley Skyped for a second,
Okay.
Explain things.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Thank you.